Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm Stephen Trainor, and Alice is downstairs helping me run this webinar this morning. We're going to be covering Photo Ephemeris Web. That is the web app version of the Photographer's Ephemeris. And this is very much a getting started session. So I'll be going through a little bit of intro material, and we'll spend most of the time in a demo of the app, talk about a few different features, some different scenarios, photography-wise. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers as we go. In Zoom, there is the Q&A button, which you should see either at the bottom of your screen. It may depend on which platform you're on and how you have your window arranged, but look for the Q&A button with the two speech bubbles. You can type your questions in there. What I'll do, I'll take little breaks as we go through the session and look to see what's come in and answer what I can. And we'll have some extra time at the end as well for questions then. So let's jump in. I'll just give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. What is it? Why do I need it? So a little bit of intro material, then the demo, then the Q&A. So you might think ephemeris, that's a funny old word, and indeed it is. It's not a word that I was aware of for most of my life. Traditionally, an ephemeris is a table of astronomical times and figures and directions and that sort of thing, and they've been around for centuries, as you can see this example from Wikipedia. But it's a lot of numbers, and typically they would tell you sort of when you could find, say a certain star, those things in certain constellations, planets in certain signs of the zodiac, that sort of thing, and they've been incredibly useful, but they're not very visual. And as photographers, I think people like visual material. So the Photographer's Ephemeris is, in this case, we're talking about the web-based tool, and it's primarily for outdoor photographers, and it was originally conceived for landscape photography. So a lot of the emphasis on what it does is around landscape photography. But it certainly can be used for cityscapes, urban photography, architectural photography, even portrait and wedding photography if you're looking to check angles of light and that sort of thing. And essentially what you do, you tell it the time and the place, and I'll go through the different ways you can set that up. And then it'll tell you where you can see the sun and the moon and everything that implies in terms of the natural light with the fall of shadows and so forth. And there's a long tradition of writing software to help photographers with this, and you may remember it seems so long ago, but it was only 12 years ago when we were still in the age of the Pocket PC and the Palm Pilot and those sort of things, and there was this very well-liked little app called Ephemeris that was on Pocket PC, and I was reading about that back in the day. And that's essentially, when I decided to call this app the Photographer's Ephemeris, it was a nod to this predecessor, which, as you can see, it has some little visual elements, but in the middle there's a table of numbers and figures, as you saw with the 16th century example in a couple of slides ago. So why do I need it? A few of the things that we hear over the years, well, just look up, just look out the window, you can see where the sun or the moon is. That's very true, but it doesn't tell you where it's going to be 6 months from now when you're planning a big trip to some nice location. So this is really about planning. It's about looking forward in particular to a future date, or finding the dates when you should go to a location. Not all dates work, not all times of day work for different places. I have my own methods of doing it. I've been doing it for years, that may be great. I would hope that you would find that the sort of tools you get with Photo Ephemeris and similar applications, they make it very easy once you get to grips with the basics of how these things are set up, and they're very quick. Then there's the claim, well, I have a good intuitive sense of where things are going to be. And that certainly can be the case with sunlight. The sun moves only gradually from day to day through the year. It's much harder with the moon. The moon is far less intuitively predictable in terms of where it's going to rise, what phase it's going to be in 2.5 months from now, for example. I wouldn't have a clue what the moon would be doing 2.5 months from now. And I've been doing this every day for 12 years. So I think that's a challenge. And I think often, even with sunlight, people don't necessarily realize just how much the sun can move during the course of the year. I'll show you an example. This was when we used to live in London. We had a place that had this view out to the west and southwest of London. This was shot from the window or the balcony, I forget, a couple of years ago. And you can see, if you know London, there's the Shard. That's I think the tallest building in London, and it's near London Bridge. Here's the City of London, so the Tower of London and Tower Bridge are somewhere in this direction. This is looking further off to the southwest. So that's a reasonably wide angle shot, and you might think, across the year, how much is the sun going to move? And the answer is an awful lot. Roughly speaking, that's where it will set. So sunset on summer solstice in the middle of June, on June 21st. And the winter solstice is off, out of shot, to the left. And the whole span is a whole 79 degrees. So it's a lot of movement. Here's another shot, similar place, a couple of years before. And that's where the winter solstice sunset occurs. This photo was taken on November 17th, and you just see from the brightness in the sky that the sun's setting somewhere around there. So in this example, you can see that there's a time of year when the sun is completely blocked by this tall nearby building. So it's useful to have a sense of how it's going to move. Of course, here it is on a map. This is a screenshot from Photo Ephemeris, and I'll go through this in some more detail. But this darker orange line is the line of sunset. So this is our location in southeast London near Greenwich. And if you were looking outward from the red pin to where the sun is setting, that's the direction in which it would set on the 21st of December. In contrast, on the 21st of June, it's setting way up here to the northwest. We'll talk a little bit more about this location later on in the session. This is Mesa Arch, and Mesa Arch is a pretty well-known location, so I'm not really spilling any secrets by talking about it here. It's in Canyonlands National Park in Utah. It's not too far from the town of Moab. I'm sure many of you have visited there. It's certainly excellent excellent place to go to if you have an opportunity. And you can see that this is looking east, and the sun is rising, and it's just through this gap at the north end of the arch here, and there's some light catching underneath the arch. So this was taken in June, I think middle of June, if I remember correctly. It was a few years ago now. Here's another shot from the same location. It's a tighter shot, so longer focal length. This was taken on New Year's Day, sunrise of January the 1st, back in 2009 now, so it's a while ago. But here you can see the sun is coming in out of shot here to the right of the picture, and the light that's catching under the arch, there's an awful lot more than there was if I just flip back to that previous shot. This is a not very well processed HDR from back in the days when HDR was didn't quite have the refinement it probably has today, so that may have something to do with it, but there's certainly less light catching underneath the arch there. So we look at this as an example of why it can be helpful to know where the sun is rising, setting, etc. And then a couple of more examples of things you can do with Photo Ephemeris Web. This is these next three shots are by Dave Johnston, who was very kind enough to give me permission to share them here today, just to give you a sense of the sort of things you can plan. This level of planning, it takes a bit more work because, as you'll see, here's the moon rising through this gap. But look how tiny the gap is. The moon and the sun typically occupy about half a degree in the sky as you look at them. So this gap, I think it has a name. I forget what the name of the gap is, but it is only just over half a degree, less than one degree as an opening. So that takes quite a lot of planning to line that up, work out your shot selection, lens selection, and so forth. But we'll talk a little bit about the things involved in doing that. So now I'm going to switch over to sharing the web app over here. Let me just quickly do that. There we are. Right. Hopefully you are now all seeing my browser window with Photo Ephemeris open, and this is typically the default thing. The very first time you sign into the app, I'm not going to go through the account sign up process here today. Let's assume you've created the account, you've signed in. This is what you're going to see. So let me just point out a few things. I'm going to use this little vanishing pen tool, which is quite nice, that Zoom provides, and I'll show you some of the basics of the screen. So let me just get myself worked out. Okay, here we are. So up here are the navigation links, and the main ones that we'll talk about today, the default one is the map here. There is a thing called the sphere, which I will show you briefly. It's not going to be too much of a focus today, but that is more of a 3D version of what you're seeing on the map. You can save locations, so places you care about, you want to return to, you can save them in the locations page. And those get synchronized to a database, our server, and that means if you log in on another device or in another browser, you'll get the same data from there. And then finally, settings, which lets you control a bunch of things as to how the app behaves. The tutorials link, I'll share that with you later, but that's well worth a look. There are 9 tutorials you can go through in increasing sort of beginner, intermediate, advanced topics. And then here, there's a link. If you want to see what's new in the web app, you can click on the updates link there, and it will tell you. Down here, you see the little version number is displayed there, and that's what's referenced in the release notes at the top here. So the main area of the screen is here, the map. It defaults to putting you in Timbuktu, and that's really is simply a default. I'm going to go through all the different ways you can get to where you want to be, and we'll do that shortly. Below the map is here the timeline. This is this area across the bottom there. That shows a whole series of events relevant to the selected date. We'll talk about some of those today. And then below that is, here's this, forgive my rough circling, but this thing down here is the altitude chart. And that is giving you a visual hint as to whether the sun is above the horizon or below the horizon, and indeed the moon as well. There are a whole bunch of other controls above the map here, and one other really important one, which is here, this little thing, that's the time slider, which lets you adjust the time of day. But I'll talk about some of the other controls as we go on. Finally, something that's well worth knowing about, down here at the bottom right, I'm going to click on it to show you. You can click on help. There it is. And that pops up, this is a little, what they call a web widget that pops up a view into our help center, and there are about 100 and something articles up there. So if you wanted to say, what does azimuth mean? You can type azimuth and it will find all the articles on the help center that talk about that topic. So if you're looking for material or answers, that's a good place to go look. So let me just double check, see if we've got any. It looks like no Q&A so far, so good. Let's talk next a little bit about how you can control how the screen looks. You may have noticed in the slide I shared earlier of London that things looked a lot cleaner and simpler. And there are two ways you can do that. Firstly is this control here. This lets you decide what you want to display. So if I click hide both, that hides the chart and the timeline. So it maximizes the map space. You can just say, just show me the timeline, or just show me the chart, or show me everything. We don't have an option to hide the map because the map is sort of the point of the page, really. In addition to that, there is a full screen button here at the top right of the map. I can click that and it gets rid of the header and the footer. So that will give you some more vertical screen space if you're on a somewhat thin or less tall device. And when you do that in conjunction with hide both, then you've got as much map space as you can possibly get, but you still have the ability to adjust the time of day plus these other controls that we'll talk about shortly. Let me put these back on and come out of full screen mode. Finally, this settings piece here lets you control what is displayed. In the free version of the app, we're talking about the sun and the moon. So I can turn the moon off. I can turn the sun off if I only care about the moon. So those are two options here. This third one is for the galactic center, so the center of the Milky Way. And so that, yeah, those are the display options I wanted to talk about. There are a few other things, there are many other things you can adjust that we'll come on to. So let's talk about how to set a location. Quick check, no Q&A, okay. If you want to set the location, typically people like to start in a familiar place, so you might want to go to where you currently are. You can click this Go to Current Location button here. The browser will prompt you to give your permission to share the location with the app. That's a permission that you control. And if you say yes, then it will relocate to where you currently are. Other things you can do, let me just zoom out on the map a little bit to show this one. I can drag and drop the map pin. So I click, drag, and release. And as I release, it recalculates everything in terms of the sun and the moon. So that's drag and drop. It recalculates all the data that is shown for the sun and the moon is calculated for this red pin position. This, you'll see it noted as the primary pin or the red pin in the tutorials. I can also use this button here to recenter the pin on the map. So I can drag the map around. Let's just get out of this blank area. I'll show you how to. This default map style is good for cities. It's not good for the desert. But let's say we're just interested in Spain. I can click that and drop the pin in the middle of the map. Next, I can do search. So I can come in here. I can type London. I can go to, let's go to the, you see it gives you a whole bunch of results. And the results that you'll see may depend on your location and language and region settings. They get prioritized. But let's go to the City of London. If I zoom in, you'll see that indeed we're in the City of London. So you can do a search. You can also search for coordinates, place names, addresses. There's a whole bunch of things you can put in there. Or you can use a saved location. So if I come over here, I've got a whole bunch of mountains saved, and I may talk a little bit about how to save those. One thing you can do, and you can see it, that's what I've done here. I've imported a whole bunch of locations. So there's import and export controls up here. You can import from a format called KML. KML is keyhole markup language, and those were the people who sort of invented Google Maps and Google Earth before they were called Google Maps and Google Earth. And you'll find in places like Wikipedia or many sort of trail sites, you can download a KML file, import it here, and you'll get the place names will pop up there. So I can choose a very tall mountain. I click go, and we'll land there. We probably want to look at a better map style for the mountains, so I'm going to change to Open Cycle Map. There you go. That's a topographic map that looks a little bit more visually rewarding. So let me just check the Q&A. I see a couple of things come in here. Okay. How do you, okay, let me answer this one. How do you change the units? So the units would be the things like the elevation in feet above here. You can come into settings, and I can choose metric, click save, go back to the map, and now we're showing meters. Sometimes if you see elevations in the maps, they're baked into the imagery, so that's not something that you can change through a setting. It would have to find a different map style to display. But other than that, yeah, you'll find them there. Whether it's using AM, PM, or 24-hour clock, I think from memory depends on what does it do? Time, oh, that's time zone format. No, here we go. Yeah, you can change that there as well. So it'll use the default for your operating system, or you can force it to 24 or 12-hour clock. So have a dig around in settings for some of those sorts of things. Okay, let's have a look. Another question. How do you zoom out? Let me answer that one. You can click zoom out. So the buttons at the bottom right here, zoom in, zoom out. What is SRTM3? Good question. Let me see what SRTM3. So there is an article that covers all of these things. It stands for Shuttle Radar Topography Mission 3 arcsecond, I think. So it's one of the data sources that tells us when you drop the pin. So let me drop it down here in a valley, much lower, 5,000 meters. The app is doing a lookup against one of these digital elevation models, and one of the ones that has really good worldwide coverage is the SRTM3 model, which came from one of the space shuttle missions where they beam down, I think, some sort of form of radar, measure the reflections, and then derive the elevations from that. So do you need to have visited your chosen location at least once to know where you want the sun and moon to be? No, that's an excellent question. I think the answer is it certainly helps to visit, but no, you don't need to have visited. There are certain things you can work out using the tool. I'm going to go through an example of that without having visited, and a lot of it is to do with how you interpret the data, which is what we're going to talk about next. So we talked about how to set a place. Let's talk about how to set the time. So a number of ways to do that. First off, up at the left here, let me just do the little highlight tool so I can show you exactly what we're going to be using here. We've got this area here. This is, if you click on that, it's going to show you a calendar. You can choose a date from the calendar. You can also click into the text field and type directly in it, type a date, and it's pretty forgiving in terms of which formats it'll take. So you can set a date by typing in there. Next along, these set of buttons here. Gosh, I can't draw very well. There we go. we've got previous event, previous day, now, tomorrow, next event. So I need to tell you what an event means. Best way is just to click on that and show you. I'll come back to that shortly. Down here, we have the time slider. So you can click on that little handle there, drag that left and right, and you can see on the chart, this x-axis is basically the time of day, and it shows you one 24-hour period. So let's start with doing a date. So I can click on the calendar. I can go through, choose a date. I can type a date. So I can do 1st of January 2022, hit enter, and it sets the date there. I can go to the 3rd of January, back to the 2nd, back to the 1st, back to right now. And then if I click here, next event, what you want to do after you've clicked next to previous event is just have a look down here in the altitude chart. And it'll tell you what the event was. This says apogee. That's, again, if you need to look any of these terms up, you can click on help, type them in. But apogee is the moment during the lunar cycle when the moon is farthest from the Earth and therefore smallest in the sky. It's a slightly obscure one. Here's a more common one, full moon, something that everybody typically wants to know about. So these previous next event buttons look through what's coming up, what's just been, and click through. You can just click from event to event, solstice, 3rd quarter of the moon, new moon. They're typically lunar related, but we also have the solstices and the equinoxes. That's the change of the seasons essentially in there as well. The other thing you can do to set a time and indeed a place is to open a link. So if you, I'll show you this at the end of the talk on how to do it, but you can generate a link once you've set things up for a certain place, or a certain date, certain time. You can grab the link for that, store it, bookmark it, do whatever you need to do. When you open it again, it'll open the app at the given date, time, map, zoom location, pin position, those sort of things. So that's always a good option. So let's just talk a little bit about how to interpret the data that's being shown. I'm going to copy a link. This is so here, there is a link indeed. So I'm using that to get back to my London setup that I showed you in those photos in the intro talk. So I paste that in, I hit enter, and now I'm going to switch back to the neighborhood map, which is much nicer to look at for the City of London. And this is now showing you, the pin is back in near Greenwich in London. The date is June the 21st, which is the summer solstice. You can see the event is noted down here in the chart. And that's because the time that we have selected, 4:32 AM, coincides with the solstice event, which you can see there in the timeline. And let's look at this line. So I showed you this line before, which was the line of sunset on the solstice. One of the key things to interpreting relating the timeline to the map is the little color coordination. So this darker orange is also indicated at the top of this little panel in the timeline for sunset. So you can click on these events and it will adjust the time of day to match that time. And the little down arrow indicates it's sunset. So a few visual clues, and I could go to sunrise and the chart changes, but you're not seeing much change on the map. If I drag the line itself, this is so dragging the slider, I should say. So I'm advancing through the morning, and what you'll see, you see the lines moving as I change. And I think generally people are aware that the sun and the moon rise in the east, set in the west, with quite a lot of variation. But you can see that line that's moving off to the east. It's just through the town of Woolwich there. And that's at 7:39 in the morning. So that is the direction. If you were looking out from the window at this place in Greenwich, and at 7:39 in the morning, that is the direction you would face to look at the sun. It's going to be somewhat higher in the sky, obviously, than it was at sunrise. And I can progress through the day. Now, the other thing you can see in the opposite direction, so there we are, we're in the late afternoon, 10 to 5 in the afternoon. The sun is hanging somewhere over Clapham. You can see that just here. And as I adjust the slider, you see when I click down on that, there are some lines that pop up here in the opposite direction. So the thick one it gives you a sense of how long the shadows are going to be. So if you watch as I advance towards sunset, that shadow projection line gets longer, and the sun is getting lower in the sky. We're going towards sunset. The shadows are getting longer. And as we get right up towards sunset, the shadow line extends outside of the circle, and the circle turns orange. Now you think, what on earth is that all about? Here's what it's telling you. At that point in time, you can look down here in the legend and you see that the sun is just under 6 degrees above the horizon. So 301 degrees is the azimuth. That's the direction, the bearing, the heading. So this is up to the northwest. And the altitude, and altitude is sort of the astronomical term for elevation angle above the horizon. You can see here it's just below 6 degrees. So we call that, we've decided to call it, it's not a scientifically well-defined term, but we're calling that golden hour. And golden hour is, what does that mean? It means two things. One, the shadows are getting deeper, which for photography purposes gives you a bit more contrast and visual interest. And secondly, the light is getting warmer, which essentially means that the color temperature is dropping. It's becoming more yellow, more orange, and we're heading towards potentially a nice sunset. You get that warmer light around the hours of sunrise and sunset. So when you see the circle go orange, it's sort of a clue to say, yeah, you're probably going to get some nice light for photography purposes at this time. A little bit more on these lines. We get shadow lines for the moon as well. So you see, I'll just turn the sun off just so it's crystal clear what we're looking at. So this is now the moon, just the moon. You see the moon only rises on this day in 5:30 in the afternoon. It's progressing. So the line that's moving across the south of the map is where you'd look to see the moon in the sky. The darker, shorter line projecting to the north is the relative shadow length from the moon. Moon shadows don't tend to matter too much. You can see them very clearly if you do a long exposure at night and you have, say, a valley and the moon comes over the valley and lights the valley floor. You take a 20-second exposure, then you're going to see the shadows from the moon as clearly as you could as the shadows in the day, depending on how you expose the shot. So it's sometimes interesting to know. It's also interesting to know in terms of when the moon's going to be above a certain object, that sort of thing. So that's the moon shadow lines. You see there's the moon set line corresponds to this dark color there. The moon rise line corresponds to the lighter blue there. You may notice that on some days, let me find one. If I click through, I think there we go. There's a day with no moonrise, and you might think, oh, is that a bug? Well, it's not. It's just that because of the cycle of the moon, it's period is slightly longer than 24 hours. So there's every so often there's a day where you don't get either a moonrise or a moonset. So if you see something missing, it's not missing, it's just it doesn't happen in that particular 24-hour period. Put the sun back on. Okay, a couple of questions. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. I missed how you turned the sun off to look at the moon only. It's let me use my little pencil thing again. I'll show you it. So the vanishing pen, let's click back here. This control here is what does that. So you can click on that control there. I'll do that now. And toggle off the moon, toggle on the moon, toggle off the sun, toggle on the sun. That's that one. Are the shadows based on the ground being level? Yes, they are. That is exactly right. This is assuming flat terrain. So obviously, if you have a ground that is sloping away from you, and let's say the shadows behind you, you're looking down a hill, the shadows are going to tend to be longer. If the ground were coming up and the light is coming from behind you, the shadows will tend to be shorter. If you're interested in exploring that in more detail, then I'm not trying to talk about the pro version of this today, but the pro version, and specifically in the sphere page here, which is a 3D piece, you can get 3D terrain in this sphere, which will let you see. It doesn't make any assumptions about level ground for the purposes of visualizing the shadows. It shows you how they would fall on 3D terrain. Okay, so let's have a look. We are 7 minutes past 11, so lots to get through. We've talked about that. I said we'd go back to Mesa Arch and have a look there. So let's do that. I'm going to take my little shortcut link, paste it in here. Here we are in Utah. When you're in Utah, you probably don't want the neighborhood map. The neighborhood map's great for cities. It's not great for the great outdoors, but OpenCycleMap is. This other one, OpenStreetMap, it's sort of a compromise. It doesn't have any topography on it, really, so it's not good for getting a visual sense of the terrain. But it's a nicely styled map. I like the way it looks, and it's certainly great in cities. So we'll stick with OpenCycleMap. That's the map controls here at the top left. And this is Mesa Arch Trailhead. And you see when I pasted the link, it reset the date to January the 1st, 2009. So let's just have a quick look back at the photograph that I showed you earlier. This was the one from the presentation. So we're looking out here towards, these are the La Salle Mountains. There's all this wonderful, these sandstone features from Canyonlands National Park, and then this natural stone arch catches the light in the morning. You can see this is, so if I point out, you see, maybe you can just use the mouse, that little prominence there with the dot in the middle of it. I guess if I zoom in, it might, yeah, it's called the Washerwoman. That feature is this thing here, I believe. And this other one behind it, I think, is Airport Tower. So those features are marked on the map. And so back to, somebody asked a good question, do you need to have visited the location to get any benefit from using the tool? No, you don't. And certainly if you have another photographic reference, that gives you a clue to interpret this data. But you can also just do some map reading and get a sense that here from the contours, we see the terrain falling away to the east. We see it's pretty much flat over to the west. So you might conclude that shots from this side of the mesa are likely to be better in the afternoon when the sun is setting to the west, and shots facing to the east are going to be good in the morning in terms of getting light coming into this area, and that is indeed the case. So use your map reading skills to help with that. Let me just double check the things I wanted to show you. That's right. Yeah. So we've got, I was going to show you the difference between, here's New Year's Day, and I'm going to turn the moon off just to make this a little easier for me to look at. If I click back in terms of events, let's go, there we are, June 20th. That's the sun rising in summer. So you remember that first shot, which had the little sun star at the left side of the arch? That's the summer shot. And then back to, let's go to January 1st. There we go. There's this winter shot. It's pretty close to the winter solstice, not exactly, but it's close. And it's coming in from much further south. So here's an interesting question. What happens, popular times to go to Utah are spring and fall. Could you get a good shot at this location in, say, the spring? Well, this gets to the question around, similar to that moonshot, how do you know when the moon's going to be in a certain place? You can do the same for the sun or the moon. I'm just going to put that back on. The topographic map here is showing you the mountains. So the mountains that you see over here in the shot are these on the map there, and we can zoom in, get a little better look at them. And they're called the La Salle Mountains, and eventually if you zoom in, you get the names. So one of the things you can do, one of the tools, and this is probably the most advanced tool we'll talk about today, is a thing called Geodetics. And Geodetics is, it's a whole sort of field of, there's the field of what they call geodesy, which is essentially a study of the Earth's geometry and shape, and it has to do with surveying and how you get lines of sight, angles, of view, measuring distances around the Earth. It's quite amazing that a formula for accurately working out these great circle distances, for example, was only worked out in the mid-70s, because the mathematics is pretty complex. And so there's a tool in here called the Geodetics tool, and you enable it by clicking the gray pin with the mountain icon here. So I'm going to do that. It drops it into a default location sort of on the due east of the map. And what it's essentially, it joins the dots between the red pin and the gray pin, and then it tells you about what's happening along that direction. I'm going to take that and I'm going to drop it on the summit of this mountain. It could be any of them, really. You can. It's a good thing to experiment with. And I'm going to zoom out so you can see what's going on here. So Geodetics. First of all, once you have it enabled, you'll see some additional information down here below the map. So it says from the red pin to the gray pin, the distance is 53 kilometers. I will switch that over to, seeing as we've got a US location, we'll use feet or miles. So 33 miles from red to gray pin at a bearing of 84-ish degrees. So that is due east is 90, due north is 0. So 83, we're sort of nearly due east. There's a difference in elevation between the red pin location, which is always given up here, the primary pin elevation you can always find above the map along with the coordinates of 6,000 feet. And the gray pin is another 6,000 feet higher. So, okay, so you know that the summit there is around 12,300 and something feet. But the most important piece of information is this, the elevation angle. So that tells you that because of the distance and because of the elevation difference and the counting for the curvature of the Earth, if you were to position your telescope and measure the angle you had to set it at, you would be setting it at roughly 2 degrees above the horizon. So what is this telling us? Well, let's say, what did I say? We're going to go in spring. So let's just go end of March, for example. End of March, you see the pale line here, the pale orange line, which is the sunrise line. So I'm going to click on sunrise, and it's rising more or less behind the mountains. And it rises at 7:07. It's due south of the mountains. Let's go, let's say, I don't know, a week or so later. Let's try 7th of April, or 6th of April. There we go. Here, as I adjust the time, so this is from sunrise just before 7 a.m. Basically, what the geodetics is telling you is that you're not going to really see the sun until it clears these mountains, and so it could be obstructed by those. So I'll just advance the timeline slowly, bring it into roughly in line with the gray pin there. And you can see at 7:13, the sun is here at plus 2.76 degrees. So it is higher than the mountain, but we're 20 minutes after sunrise at this point. If I reverse it back a little bit, so let's go, there we are, 7:08 a.m. Now, it may be a little bit different in this direction, the elevation angle, but the sun is getting blocked by the mountains. And you might think, hey, well, it's only 10, 12 minutes that we have to wait before the sun comes up. But if you've done a lot of shooting of sunrise and sunset, you know that if you want the most intense orange light, you really need the 1, 2, 3 minutes after the sun rises. And at this time of year, you're going to likely miss those. So you can use this tool, the Geodetics tool, to explore some of these questions. It's typically best used in conjunction with OpenCycleMap, which is a topographic map. And I would encourage you just to look at the map, drag it around, see what it's telling you. There we go, 1.65 degrees there. It flashed to some negative number. That was while it was querying the data. And you can get a sense of whether sight lines are going to be clear. So the way it works is look at the map, see what the obstacles might be, think about what shot you might want to look at. You're saying this is a morning location. I can see the terrain falls away to the east, but I have some potential obstructions. So you can explore those with geodetics. Look for the elevation angle. Look for the time of sunrise or the time of day that matters to you, and then compare the altitude of the sun or the moon with the elevation angle that you're getting from the measurement, and you'll know whether it's going to be above or below the obstacle. I'll show you very quickly, come back here. So we're back at 1.81. Here, if I go to the sphere, I need to zoom out a little bit, but this is, you can get a little bit of a 3D sense of what's going on there. So it shows you the map. This is going to be a very whirlwind tour. You can rotate this model around. It shows you the angle up to the pin based on what was measured here, this 1.81 degrees. And then you can see the sun move through the course of the day. You can see how the shadows change. Again, this version, the free version, assumes flat ground. You can upgrade to get the full 3D terrain experience, if that's helpful. So yeah, this is giving you a sense of how you can use geodetics. So hopefully that was useful in just terms of getting a sense of what this tool is intended to be used for. The key thing for, I think, getting the most out of this tool and the free version of it is to use your map reading skills, think about what shots you might want to look at the timings. If it's the moon, you want to look at things like the moon phase. So you see down here at the bottom left, here the moon is approaching full, but it's not full yet, and it's setting in the middle of the night. So you can explore the dates. You can see the moon is waxing, getting fuller. 100% is full, 0% is new, and see what opportunities are out there based on either when you're going to be at a location or when you might wish to travel there in order to catch a specific set of circumstances. Okay, so we got 10 minutes left. Right, okay, one more thing I wanted to show you. I'm going to jump into the questions very shortly. This last thing is, let's say you've spent this time, you've set up the pins, you set up the dates, you've got it how you want it, and you want to save that shot plan. What do? You click here, the share button at the top right. This gives you a link. So those links that I was pasting back into the browser, you can just copy it and you can save that as a bookmark. You can put it into your calendar. You can do whatever you need to do, put it into any other location where you're storing your plans. So that's how to share it. Now, let me go into some questions. There were some good ones. Let's deal with this one first. You're not mentioning the blue hour like you do for golden hour. Any reason for this? There is a good reason for this. There's an article I did somewhere online. I may dig it out and send it to you. There's no scientific definition for what golden hour is. There's no generally accepted consensus for what it is. The same applies to blue hour. So if you look across different photography planning apps, they all have different definitions of what blue hour is. Some will say it's from 0 to -4. Some will say it's from -2 to -6 degrees. Others will say it's from -4 to -10 degrees. It's like, okay, so what is it? The thing is that we actually do have really good, perfectly well accepted scientific definitions for what these things are, which are the twilight times. And these blue panels here show you twilight. So at sunset, the sun is just below the horizon, and that's because it's roughly ½ a degree in diameter. So to see the top edge of it peek over the horizon, it's the center of the disk is just below the horizon. At civil twilight, it's 6 degrees below the horizon. At nautical twilight, it's 12 degrees. At astronomical twilight, it's 18 degrees. And those are widely accepted definitions. So instead of using blue hour, which could mean a whole number of different things, we avoid blue hour. We provide all of the twilight times. So hopefully, Olivia, that helps answer your question. Let me have a look here. Carlos asks, when you move across the day hours, the shadows in the terrain map are also moving. They are not. That's a good question. So this map here that you're looking at, the shadows that you see are baked in, and this is when the map designer designs the map and renders all this data out. They decide we're going to show shadows, and the convention is it's typically with the sun somewhere in the northwest, which is what you're seeing here. So that's really a clue to read the relief and the topography of the area rather than the shadows moving. If you would like to see shadows moving, I'll show you it very quickly. So this is the upgraded version. If I go to the sphere now and you want to see shadows, then what we'll do, I'm going to zoom out. We find a better location for this. Turn that off. Go to Annapurna. That's always a good one. For this, turn on a map. Go to the sphere. There you go. That's better. I think that was just switching the accounts, confused it for a moment there. but that's this is in the upgraded version. You get the 3D terrain, and then you do see the shadows move on the map. So that's that one. Is using the web page the same as using the app? It's very similar. The timeline, the way the pins work, the colors of the lines, the altitude chart, all of that is almost identical to using the app on iPhone or iPad. The date controls are a little bit different. We don't really have the sphere in the app at the moment. There is a TPE 3D app on iOS that does more or less what the sphere does in the web app. It plays the same role, so that's available. But broadly speaking, yes, anything you learn here you could generally apply in iOS. In the future, do you think it would be possible to have the real weather map directly live to know if it could be a beautiful day, for example, cloudy? Well, yes, possibly. It's something we do look at. We've got some thoughts on how to incorporate Skyfire. So Skyfire is another product that we sell at the moment through the iOS app that it does predictions of sunrise and sunset color. So it'll say, is it going to be a colorful sunrise with, nicely underlit clouds or not? We're looking at how we could bring that into the web app. And there may be possibilities for more weather data as well in the future. Carlos asks, excellent question. The app gives us information, a direct line of sight between 2 points, but does it tell you if there's any obstacle in between them? At the moment, in this version, it doesn't. In the iOS version of the app, when Geodetics is enabled, you will see it shows a little elevation profile, which is either solid or dotted, depending on whether you have clean line of sight. That's something we may bring into the web app as well once I get a chance to look at it. But you more or less get the same thing from the 3D sphere. So if I put pin over there, come back to the sphere, you can see. There's the pin. So you can see whether there's line of sight across there. But that's in the pro version. Okay, how do you use the sphere to find the Milky Way? So the Milky Way is not included in the free version of the app. In the pro version of the app, you can come to the sphere. You can enable the Milky Way. I'll put the moon in as well. And as I rotate around, there is this line here shows you the galactic center. So that's the most dense part of the galaxy, which is mostly the most photogenic part. So you can use the timeline to find where the band of the Milky Way, that's what these spheres are representing, and the largest sphere is the center of the Milky Way, where that's going to be over time. There is, in addition, a tool we haven't talked about at all today called Visual Search, which you can use to find dates and times when the sun, the moon, or the galactic center will be in a particular location in the sky. So that's something that you might like to explore. You can use that with the sun for free in the free version, and it's worth playing with because it can help you identify dates very, very quickly for when the sun will be in a certain place. I think we're going to run slightly over today just because we've got still a few questions to answer. So I'll press on, but if any of you need to drop off, thanks so much for joining today. We should have a recording of this done in a few days, and I'll send out a link to it via email again. But let me press on with a few more questions here. Had problems saving coordinates so I can go back to them in the future. So let me very quickly show how to save a location. Turn that off. I'm going to search for one of my favorite places in England, Bamborough. Bamborough is a wonderful castle on the northeast coast of England. It's when you first visit the website and you see this, or the web app page, you might have seen I have a photo of it from there. Castle is here. You can photograph it from up here on the beach. So let's say you wanted to save that location. Here's what you would do. You position the pin, you go to locations, you click add, you give it a title, Bamborough Beach, some notes, you click save, and it's saved. Now if I just filter, you can see that there's the one I saved. I select it and click go, and well, let me just put it somewhere random and then I'll go back to it just to show you going back to a location. So that's very quick demo of saving locations. There is a tutorial on that. Again, Tish, if you search for locations down here in help, I would recommend looking at part 5. There's a tutorial that covers that specifically. Janet asks, how am I moving the sphere around? Excellent question. Basically, I take my mouse, go to just sunny time of day, click, drag. I'm using a trackpad. If I do 2 fingers and move the fingers in and out, it zooms in and out, but otherwise it's just click, click and drag. So written tutorials are here on the Help Center. There are 10 parts. Don't let that intimidate you. They're all fairly straightforward. If you prefer videos, come to our showcase on Vimeo, and there's a whole bunch of tutorials there. And this one is more of a background as to how why you would use it. A few more examples than I had time to give today. And that, I think, is it. So thank you so much. There'll be a little survey as you leave. If you have time to answer it, that would be great. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you again on a future webinar. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.